The rain fell in relentless sheets, hammering the cracked pavement outside Daniel's tiny apartment, as if the sky itself were grieving. Inside, the single dad sat at a wobbly kitchen table, his calloused hands cradling a chipped mug of cold coffee, staring at the eviction notice that had arrived that morning. His 6-year-old daughter, Lily, slept soundly in the next room, her soft snores a fragile reminder of the only light in his darkening world. Daniel's heart ached with a weight he could barely name, years of loss, struggle, and sacrifice pressed against his chest, threatening to suffocate him. He was a man who had once dreamed of building a better life, but now, at 34, he was drowning in debt, working double shifts at the factory, and barely keeping food on the table. Tonight, though, something unexpected was about to change the course of his life. A knock at the door, hesitant, almost drowned out by the storm, shattered the silence. Daniel froze, his tired eyes narrowing. Who would come to this rundown corner of the city at this hour, in this weather? He opened the door to find a teenage girl, soaked to the bone, her dark hair plastered to her face, her thin jacket offering no protection against the cold. Her eyes, wide and desperate, met his, and in that moment, Daniel's weary heart stirred with a flicker of compassion he couldn't ignore. Little did he know, this stranger was no ordinary girl. She was the daughter of a millionaire, and her arrival would unravel secrets that could either save or shatter his fragile world. Before we dive deeper into this heart-wrenching story, I want to ask you something. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, or in the power of a single act to change a life, please hit that like button, drop a comment, share this video, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks. Your support helps us share more stories that remind us of the beauty in humanity. Now, let's step back into Daniel's world and see how one rainy night changed everything. Daniel's apartment was a testament to his struggles. The walls were stained with years of neglect, the furniture mismatched and worn, salvaged from thrift stores or curbsides. A single bulb flickered above the kitchen table, casting long shadows that seemed to mirror the doubts in his mind. He had been a widower for 4 years, ever since Lily's mother, Sarah, succumbed to cancer. Her loss had gutted him, leaving a void that no amount of hard work could fill. Lily was his reason to keep going, her bright eyes and infectious giggle a daily reminder of the promises he'd made to Sarah, to give the daughter a life worth living. But promises were hard to keep when the world seemed determined to break him. The factory job paid just enough to cover rent and groceries, but medical bills from Sarah's treatment still loomed, and now the landlord was threatening to evict them. Daniel had spent the evening calculating how many extra shifts he'd need to scrape by, but the numbers didn't add up. He was one missed paycheck away from losing everything. The girl at the door looked no older than 16. Her thin frame shivering as she clutched a small backpack to her chest. Her clothes, though sodden, hinted at quality, a designer jacket, though torn, and boots that looked expensive despite the mud caking them. Daniel's first instinct was caution. This was a rough neighborhood, and strangers didn't just show up asking for help. But her eyes, pleading, haunted, and so very young, disarmed him. She introduced herself as Emma, her voice trembling as she explained she'd missed the last bus and had nowhere to go. She didn't say much else, only that she needed a place to stay for the night. Daniel hesitated, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. He had Lily to protect, and letting a stranger into their home felt reckless. But the storm outside was merciless, and the thought of sending this girl back into it felt even more wrong. Against his better judgment, he stepped aside and let her in, offering her a towel and a cup of tea. Emma sat quietly, her gaze darting around the apartment, taking in the cracked linoleum and the stack of unpaid bills on the counter. She didn't speak much, but her presence filled the small space with an unspoken weight, as if she carried secrets too heavy for her slight shoulders. As the night wore on, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Emma than she let on. She was polite, almost too polite, and her manners seemed out of place in the gritty reality of his world. When he asked about her family, her answers were vague. She said she was figuring things out and needed a night to clear her head. Daniel didn't press. He knew what it was like to carry pain you couldn't share. He made up the couch with a threadbare blanket and an old pillow, apologizing for the lack of comfort. Emma thanked him softly, her voice catching as if gratitude was unfamiliar to her. As he turned off the light and checked on Lily, Daniel's mind churned. He wondered if he'd made a mistake, letting a stranger into his home. But there was something about Emma's vulnerability that tugged at him, reminding him of the times he'd felt lost and alone. He didn't know it yet, but that single act of kindness was about to set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. The next morning, Daniel woke to the smell of pancakes, burnt ones, but pancakes nonetheless. Emma was in the kitchen, clumsily flipping batter on the stove, her face flushed with effort. Lily was perched on a stool, giggling as she watched. The sight caught Daniel off guard. It had been years since anyone but him had cooked in that kitchen. Emma apologized for raiding the pantry, but Daniel waved it off, his heart softening at the sight of Lily's smile. Over breakfast, Emma opened up slightly, mentioning she was from a city a few hours away and had left home after a fight with her parents. She didn't elaborate, and Daniel didn't push. Instead, he shared a little about his own life, about Sarah, the factory, and the constant struggle to keep Lily fed and happy. Emma listened intently, her eyes glistening with something Daniel couldn't quite place, empathy, perhaps, or guilt. After breakfast, she insisted on leaving, thanking him profusely and promising to repay his kindness. Daniel brushed it off, saying it was nothing, but as she walked out the door, he noticed a small envelope tucked under the couch cushion. Inside was a note with a phone number and the words, "You're a good man. I won't forget this." Daniel tucked it into his pocket, assuming he'd never hear from her again. Days turned into weeks, and life resumed its grueling rhythm. Daniel worked longer hours, picking up extra shifts to stave off eviction. Lily started asking about the nice girl who made pancakes, and Daniel found himself wondering about Emma, too. There was something about her that lingered in his mind, her quiet strength, the way she'd looked at Lily with such tenderness. He tried calling the number she'd left, but it went straight to voicemail. Meanwhile, the pressure mounted. The landlord gave him a final warning, and a surprise medical bill for Lily's asthma medication pushed him to the brink. Daniel began to lose hope, his nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering how he'd failed Sarah, failed Lily, failed himself. He didn't know that across the city, Emma was grappling with her own battles, ones that would soon intersect with his in ways he couldn't imagine. Emma, as it turned out, was not just any runaway. She was Amelia Grace Hawthorne, the only daughter of Richard Hawthorne, a real estate tycoon whose name was synonymous with wealth and power. Emma's life had been one of privilege, but it came at a cost. Her father was a cold, controlling man, obsessed with his empire and determined to mold Emma into a perfect heiress. Her mother, long gone, had left her with memories of warmth that felt like a distant dream. Emma's rebellion had been brewing for years, fueled by her father's suffocating expectations and her own longing for freedom. The night she knocked on Daniel's door, she'd fled after a heated argument, determined to prove she could survive on her own. But Daniel's kindness, the way he'd opened his home without question, the way he spoke of Lily with such love, had shaken her. For the first time, she saw a glimpse of the life she craved, one built on love and sacrifice, not money and control. Back at her father's mansion, Emma wrestled with her next steps. She wanted to help Daniel, but she knew her father would never approve. Still, she couldn't forget the man who'd given her shelter when she had nowhere else to go. One evening, as Daniel sat sorting through bills, his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, and when he answered, a man's voice, polished, authoritative, introduced himself as Richard Hawthorne. Daniel's stomach dropped, assuming Emma was in trouble. But Richard's tone was measured, almost respectful. He explained that Emma had told him about Daniel's kindness, and he wanted to meet. Daniel, wary but desperate, agreed. The next day, he found himself in a sleek office downtown, face to face with a man who exuded wealth in every detail. His tailored suit, his gold watch, the way he commanded the room. Richard studied Daniel, his sharp eyes assessing every word. He revealed that Emma had run away multiple times, but this time, she'd come back changed. She'd spoken of Daniel's struggles, his love for his daughter, and his selflessness in helping a stranger. Richard admitted he'd been skeptical, expecting a con artist, but Emma's insistence had convinced him to dig deeper. He'd had Daniel investigated, and what he found, a hard-working, grieving father fighting to keep his daughter safe, had surprised him. Richard offered Daniel a deal, a job at one of his companies, with a salary that would cover his debts and secure a better home for Lily. In return, Richard asked only that Daniel continue to be a positive influence on Emma, who had grown distant from her father. Daniel was stunned, his pride warring with his desperation. He wanted to refuse, to say he didn't need charity, but the thought of Lily's future stopped him. He accepted, shaking Richard's hand with a mix of gratitude and unease. Over the next few months, Daniel's life began to change. The new job was challenging but rewarding, and the steady income allowed him to move Lily to a brighter, safer apartment. Emma visited often, forming a bond with Lily that filled the little girl's days with laughter. Daniel watched in awe as Emma, once guarded and lost, began to open up, her sharp edges softening. She confided in him about her strained relationship with her father, her dreams of studying art instead of business, and her fear of never being enough. Daniel, in turn, shared his own fears, of failing Lily, of losing the memory of Sarah. Their conversations, quiet and honest, built a bridge between two very different worlds. As spring turned to summer, Daniel noticed a change in himself. The weight on his chest was lighter, the future less daunting. He and Emma worked together on a community project, transforming an abandoned lot into a garden for the neighborhood kids. It was Emma's idea, funded by her trust fund, but Daniel's hands-on approach made it real. The garden became a symbol of hope, a place where Lily and other children played under the sun, their laughter echoing through the once bleak streets. Richard, watching from a distance, saw his daughter come alive in ways he'd never imagined. He began to soften, attending the garden's opening and even joining Lily in planting a row of sunflowers. For the first time, Daniel saw a flicker of the man Emma might have loved once, a man who, like him, was learning to rebuild. By the time fall arrived, Daniel's life was unrecognizable. He was no longer the man on the edge of despair. He had a home, a purpose, and a makeshift family that included Emma and, in a surprising twist, Richard. The eviction notice was a distant memory, replaced by photos of Lily in the garden, her face smeared with dirt and joy. Emma enrolled in art school, her father's reluctant blessing a hard-won victory. Daniel never forgot the night Emma knocked on his door, a moment that had seemed so small but had changed everything. He realized that kindness, even when given from a place of scarcity, could ripple outward, touching lives in ways no one could predict. He thought of Sarah often, believing she'd be proud of the man he'd become. Not perfect, but trying, always trying. If this story of kindness, redemption, and second chances touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Subscribe to Kindness Speaks to join us in spreading stories that remind us of the good in the world. Your support means everything, and we'd love to hear your thoughts below. Share a time when a small act of kindness changed your life or someone else's. Let's keep this chain of hope going. And before we end, a special request, please leave a comment with the word hope to show you believe in the power of compassion to transform lives. Thank you for watching, and may kindness always find its way back to you.